Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one we are going to stick to Scotland and we're going to return to a brewery that have now featured on the channel a good number of times before. They're a very new addition to the Scottish beer scene, but I have to say I have been very impressed with the beers that these guys have been doing so far. They've got a very good reception, you know, people are really talking about this brewery, and it's one of the Scottish breweries that you definitely need to keep an eye on over the next little while. But this will be review number 8 or 9 or so that I think I've done from this brewery so far, and that's mainly just because I've enjoyed their beers so much. So for this review then we are going to head through to Edinburgh once again, although you can say Dundee for this brewery as well because that's where they're brewing most of their beers, but we're going to have a look at yet another beer from the wonderful Vault City Brewing. So this one is another one of their sour IPAs. This is the sour IPA version 3, Nelson Sauvin and Victoria's Secret. It comes in at 8% ABV, and hopefully this one turns out to be as good as the last sour IPA I had. The last beer that I reviewed from these guys was the OG IPA, and that was probably one of the most kind of puckering and sour ones that I've had from them so far. But maybe about, it must be about, you know, back in like March or February or something, nearly a year ago now, I reviewed the sour IPA version 1, and that was a really interesting beer. That was only the second or so beer that I reviewed from these guys. I think the very first one I reviewed was the Iron Brew Sour actually, and then I had a go at the sour IPA version 1. But yeah, as I said, these guys do some really interesting sour beers, and they are a brewery that you definitely need to check out if you're particularly interested in Scottish craft beer. So hoping that this one turns out to be as good as some of the other beers that I've had, and I hope that you guys enjoy my take on this one as well. You guys know that I'm a huge fan of the New Zealand hops, and the Australian hops are pretty damn good as well, so I'm thinking this one should be pretty damn nice. But yeah, let's go for it then. So as always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Vault City Brewing before, and you will no doubt see more added to that list in the fairly near future. I am planning to do 2 more during this extended cycle of Scottish and English beer reviews, but there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The whole channel of course has a geography based tagging system, so you can go into the homepage and search for beer based on country, city, state, county, province, prefecture, whatever it is you're interested in. Do check out the playlists of beers from different countries. There is one there for all the Scottish beers that I've reviewed for you. That's being added to quite regularly at the moment because I am enjoying a little bit of an extended period of home in the motherland of Scotland owing to the COVID pandemic and all of this. But as always, please do get in touch and let me know some of the other beers and breweries that you guys would like to see me review. It's always great to hear from you guys that are watching the videos, and the support that you show the channel is hugely appreciated. So anyway, to tell you a little bit about Vault City Brewing then, on to my brewery notes. So Vault City Brewing, as I've mentioned to you already, are originally based in Edinburgh, and they are brewing their beers up in Dundee now, like I said, but they were founded back in 2018 by Johnny Horn, Adele Wilkie and Stephen Smith-Hay. So Johnny worked at the Hanging Back Brew Pub in the city, which I do recommend that you check out, and Stephen and Adele were regular customers there, and just over time they all became friends. But Johnny was studying at the time that they met, and he was also a keen home brewer, as was Stephen, and this was the basis for them just kind of hitting it off, you know, talking about different ingredients, different beers and all of this kind of thing. But the two began planning a brewery together, and then Adele contributed a lot of the ideas in the early stages and then joined them fully a little bit later on. But Johnny was a great fan of the Belgian lambics and other sours, and this just rubbed off on Adele and Stephen, and they felt that when they were planning the brewery this was a real gap in the Scottish beer scene, and so they decided that this was the route they were going to take, and let's just say it has gone very well for them. But initially they didn't think so much about the business making money, and so they set up what they call a glorified home brewing kit as their main brewery in Stephen and Adele's kitchen, and they began brewing weekly back in July of 2018. But over the last years they've been visiting different beer festivals around Europe and just getting their name out there a little bit more, spreading the word about their beers, and it is going really well for them, I have to say. They've been producing lots of different things since they've gone and started brewing their beers at 71 Brewing's facility up in Dundee. They've really been able to kind of up their capacity a bit and get their name more widely recognised. I actually first encountered this brewery at Brewskival in 2019, I want to say, and I realised it was a Scottish brewery, but unfortunately by the time I found their counter they were already sold out of all their beers actually. So yeah, I never got to try them there, and it was only when I came home and reviewed the Iron Brew Sour for you that I actually got to try their beers. So yeah, they have been doing a lot of stuff across Europe in recent times, and like I said, they are one of the Scottish breweries that you really want to kind of check out. As of January 2021, when I'm filming this review for you, they've produced a little bit over 70 different kinds of beer according to Untappd, and the other thing to note about this brewery would be the name. So the brewery takes its name from the Edinburgh or Southside vaults, which were built in the archways of the Southside Bridge in Edinburgh, which is in the old town, and these used to be home to, you know, like cobblers, different tradesmen, taverns, and things like this actually. So yeah, they wanted a kind of traditional Edinburgh name to mark the fact that they were from Edinburgh. And it's, you know, they're very well known these days. They are actually very, very well respected, not just in Scotland, but down into England, pardon me, and things like that as well. So yeah, really nice to see a Scottish sour beer brewery taking off, and you know, long may it continue. I look forward to seeing how these guys do over the next few years. I guess eventually they will get their own brewery, and I guess the next stage for them might be to open up a tap room in Edinburgh somewhere. That would be really cool if Vault City could open up a tap room at some point. But I really would love to get these guys on the channel for a Meet the Brewery segment at some point, especially at such an early kind of juncture in their history. So we will see about trying to organise that in September. I'd love to get up to, you know, the brewery in Dundee, or meet these guys in Edinburgh or something, and just film a kind of Meet the Brewery segment with them. Actually, it'd be cool to go and see some of their barrels and things like that they're aging the beers in. So we hopefully we can get that sorted. But yeah, that's all I can really tell you about Vault City Brewing for the moment. If you want to learn more about these guys, you can check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can of course check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn more about all the different beers that these guys have done. The other thing I would point out is that if you order over a certain amount, you can get free postage Scotland wide, and I think maybe England wide as well actually. I think throughout the whole of the UK you can maybe get free postage if you order over a certain amount with these guys. I bought 4 beers direct from the brewery that I was really interested in, so probably the next time I'm home in Scotland I'll do that again actually. So yeah, order direct from the shop, and that helps the brewery out as well. But yeah, this one, as I say, I think should be very, very nice. But that's it for your history section. Check out those links like I said, and now we're going to get on and actually taste this beer. So yeah, I'll just let you have a little look at the artwork of this one before we open up. There you can see the Vault City Brewing Company symbol there, which is very, very nice. You know, it's typical artwork that you see on this beer as well. I really like that as well. But as you can see, this one is 8%, so I guess you could call this an Imperial Sour IPA. I've got a feeling that the other one I had was maybe about 7%. I think this one is a little bit stronger, come to think of it. So this one is more like a kind of sour double IPA, or a sour Imperial IPA. But yeah, sour IPA version 3, Nelson Sauvin and Victoria's Secret. Nelson Sauvin, as we know, comes from New Zealand. Lovely white, green, grapey flavours there, about 16% alpha acid. Victoria's Secret is kind of the little brother of Galaxy. Lots of nice kind of soft tropical fruits in there, passion fruit and other kind of things. I think that's about 11 or 12% alpha acid if I remember rightly. But yeah, as you can see, it says brewed and bottled by Vault City at Belfield Street, Dundee, which is of course the 71 brewing facility. But it says on the back here, sour IPA version 3, Nelson Sauvin and Victoria's Secret. We believe our sour IPAs have great potential, and we want you to join us in realising it. The third iteration of our sour IPA series has taken an Antipodean journey to a tropical taste paradise. Hot mixed culture fermentation is uninterrupted by bittering hops for a tart, fruity and ester-filled base beer. Loaded with Nelson Sauvin and Victoria's Secret in the dry hop, Sour IPA version 3 is a juicy taste of what Southern Hemisphere hops have to offer. Enjoy cold and allowed to warm. So yeah, that's kind of what we're doing. I've had this beer sitting out of the fridge for a little bit just to kind of get it started, but yeah, I think it should be quite nice. There you can see the Vault City Brewing symbol is on the bottle cap of this one as well. But yeah, 8% this beer, and it is 375 millilitres. This one again cost me somewhere in the region of £7. I think I paid about £28 for the 4 beers that I ordered from Vault City Brewing. So for 4 sour beers, I think that is pretty decent actually. But let's get this guy out and we will get on with the tasting then. As you can see, a little bit of smoke on the opening there, then we'll get it out into the glass. I tell you something, that was the funny thing when these beers arrived, was they came in a big massive box, and it was only 4 beers, but it was actually pretty heavy. I mean, these beers in the bottles, the bottles are pretty damn heavy actually, they're pretty heavy duty. So yeah, that would be the thing you would do. I mean, that bottle's got to weigh a good... That's got to weigh a good 5, 6, maybe even 700 grams or something like that. That's a pretty heavy bottle, I have to say. But yeah, I need to weigh. I'm going to weigh that after this video just to see what it is. I'm just curious. But yeah, this looks very, very nice, I have to say. It does say on the side that this one has wheat and oats in it. And remember, one of the things I've always said that I really like about these sour beers from Vault City is that they use hops in their beers. Quite a few of these sour beer breweries in Sweden actually don't use hops in their beers, and I think the beer just loses a little bit of depth because of that. So that's something I've always appreciated about Vault City. Even though that, you know, this one is an IPA, so they are going to use hops in it, but some of the other ones, they always put a little bit of hop in them, which I think just gives the beer a bit of depth. But as you can see, this beer has poured kind of how you would expect from a kind of modern IPA, to be honest with you. This one looks like a little bit of peach juice or something like that. It's very, very pale, kind of like pineapple juice might be, but this really reminds me just of some of the peach juice that I've had in the past. That was one of the ways I taught myself about all the different fruit flavours, was to drink the juice. I'm not a great fan of eating fruit, it's just that I don't like the texture of fruit that much. But yeah, I taught myself about all the different fruit flavours through different fruit juices and things, and this one certainly looks a little bit more like a kind of peach juice. I always think that's a really good frame of reference to describe the. I think that's always a really good way to kind of describe these different beers in terms of their colours. Just refer them, you know, use the fruit juices as a reference point. But you can see this beer had virtually no head when we poured it out, which is interesting considering there's wheat in there. Usually wheat helps head formation and retention, but like I say, in terms of the colour, a lovely kind of pale, almost peach juicy type colour there, lovely kind of pale yellow sort of thing. But yeah, one or two big bubbles sticking towards the side of the glass. You can see a few just going up towards the surface there, but overall it does look pretty nice, and not a lot of difference between this and the other sour IPA that I had in the past from these guys. I just wanted, you know, I was trying quite a few quirky beers from these guys, and I thought that this one might be interesting because I'd already had one in this series before, so maybe it just lets us see how the brewery has progressed a little bit. But it really just looks like a kind of New England IPA of some description. But at 8%, you know, you would expect quite a bit of haziness to a beer like this. You know, the wheat and the oat content usually puts the haziness up, and you are certainly getting with that with this. This beer does look pretty soupy and gloopy. If we put it behind the light or in front of the light, there's quite a lot going on with this one. But yeah, it does look absolutely great. So yeah, lovely looking beer, this one. But remember, the colour of your beer is dependent on two things: one, type of malt that you use; two, the length of the boil. The longer you boil the beer, or you boil the wort, I should say, the more the sugar's caramelised, thus you get a darker colour. But again, it's dependent on exactly what you know, it is dependent on exactly what type of what type of malts you use in the first instance. But yeah, let's have a closer look at the aroma of this one and see how we go on. Nothing madly surprising about this beer in terms of its appearance when you consider what style it is. So yeah, let's go for it. Well, let's just say it actually smells very, very sweet and very oaty leaning. See, if I was smelling this blind without knowing what it was, I don't think I'd guess that was a sour IPA, to be honest with you. I don't think I would. It's very... That's really just kind of unusual. It actually smells very similar to some of the sweeter sours that I've had from these guys before, but it just doesn't smell sour. You don't get that citricy kind of element out of it that you might expect. I'm sure it'll come out in the flavour right enough, but this beer is very, very oaty and very, very smooth in its aroma. You get a lot of, like, you know, Werther's Original kind of butter candy out of this one, but that's just really surprising. You know, in fairness, when you take the aroma in quite deeply, you get a bit of bitiness from the wheat, you get a little bit of a kind of citricy sharpness out of it, but I mean, other than that, it's quite, you know, other than that, this beer, it really just smells like a big oaty, malty kind of thing. That is not what I expected from this beer at all, to be honest with you. In honesty, the aroma doesn't have too much going on with it, and I've said this in other sour reviews as well. Quite a lot of these modern sours, they don't have the most complex of aromas, but I've always found that unless you're talking you know, like a Flanders Red, or, you know, some of the lambics can have fairly complex notes to them as well. And quite often with these more modern sour beers, their aromas are very straight shooting. You know, you get a little bit of oat, you get a little bit of wheat, you get some nice juicy fruit, and, you know, maybe even a wee bit of that Werther's Original kind of thing I was talking about. But other than that, you just don't get overly much from these beers in terms of the aroma profile, but they're always beautiful. You know, they always smell really, really nice, but they're not that complex. They're just really nicely done, and that's the kind of impression I'm getting out of this beer. Absolutely. So there's a lovely big smooth oaty base to the beer. Yeah, there's a lovely big kind of oaty smoothness to it. You can pick up a little bit of the wheat if you take the aroma in a little bit more deeply. But yeah, it's got quite a little bit of a kind of Werther's Originally type thing actually. It's got a really nice kind of creamy quality to it as well, which I can really appreciate for sure. I'm just very curious to see how this beer turns out, but other than that there's not too much to report in the malt base, but it's a very oily, kind of thick, smooth kind of thing actually. In terms of the hoppy side of things then, so for me, yeah, on the hoppy side of things, I would say it's got a nice little bit of earthiness to it. There's a really nice little bit of earthiness to this one, but not too much, just a very, very small hint of it. So I would wonder if they have got maybe one of the German Noble hops in here, just as a kind of base layer before they've put the other hops in. I would suspect that the Nelson, Sauvignon and the Victoria's Secret have been added later in the boil to be more kind of flavour and aroma hops, and probably the early edition hop would be something German and Noble, perhaps, you know, Hallertau, Tettnanger sort of thing. Usually with sours like this, they add older hops or lower alpha acid hops that are not going to detract from the sourness of the beer. But yeah, it has got a nice little bit of floral character to it, but again, not too punchy. A little bit of a lighter grassiness, but then you've got all these kind of fruity components as well. But even then, those are not too punchy. You do get a little bit of that citricy sharpness in there at the front of the nose, but then you do also have that nice big juicy gooseberry type thing from the you've got a nice big kind of juicy gooseberry type thing from the Nelson Sauvignon in here. Lovely soft kind of passion fruity note from there's a lovely soft kind of passion fruity note from the Victoria's Secret, which I really, really like. But you've also got you know, you also have just a little bit of a kind of soft, like mango, papaya, apricot-y sort of thing in here as well. But the fruits, I don't find the fruits overly prominent in the aroma here, I really don't. You have to kind of search for them a little bit. It's really like that soft apricot, papaya kind of thing that's in there. You get a lot, in fairness, the more that I smell of this beer, I do get a lot of the Nelson. But the Victoria's Secret's not, it usually gives you just a little bit of passion fruit, and you don't get so much of that, and you can feel that the kind of citricy note is kind of hiding underneath those fruits. So yeah, it's a really unexpected aroma from this one, and I've probably spent a little bit more time than I should have analysing it, based on, you know, exactly how complex it is. But it's always interesting to think about actually. But take a little bit of time to ponder that over for yourself. Quite surprising for me, I would say, but let's just go and have a taste of this beer. So this one is the Sour IPA version 3 with Nelson Sauvignon and Victoria's Secret and an 8% ABV. So let's have a taste of this. Slange, skull, cheers. Do get the sourness out of this as soon as you take it in, but again, it's not overpoweringly sour actually. But yeah, again, that's a very, very solid beer, this one, I have to say. In some ways, it is actually kind of what you would expect from the aroma. It's got the malty side of this beer is done very, very well actually. It's got a lovely big kind of creamy malt base to it, and I think that complements the sour side of this beer very well. I'm also drinking this beer pretty damn fresh by the looks of it, because it does have a little bit of that kind of dry hopping dustiness to it still. So maybe, I've not had too many sour IPAs right enough, but maybe with these kind of beers we have to treat them in the same way as New England's. I've always felt that New England's need just a little bit of time to sit in the can and mellow out, but this one is in very, very good shape at the moment actually, and I think I've had this beer sitting in the fridge maybe 2 weeks or something like that, so it is in very good shape at the moment for me. But I'm just going to say thumbs up to Vault City once again for this. I think what they're going to have to do with these sour IPAs at some point is maybe create one that's like a kind of core sour IPA, you know, like a kind of Citra and Simcoe one or something like that, or a Citra and Mosaic, you know, using two of the hops that are produced on a larger scale, but obviously keep doing this series with the kind of experimental ones as well. But this one, I do think that from memory, I would consider this one as being quite a bit better than the sour IPA version 1, and that's not to take anything away from that beer because it was good, but I think maybe, I'm sure this one's a little bit stronger in alcohol. I've got a feeling that other IPA was like 7%. So yeah, I think this one, the slightly stronger alcohol, works a bit better with these sour IPAs, and that's not just because I'm Scottish, but yeah, I think the slightly higher alcohol and the bigger malt content just gives the beer a really nice balance actually. So yeah, it's just like a slightly sour edge, but that's the thing with Vault City. I wouldn't describe these beers as being overly puckering. They're actually very smooth and just slightly sour, if that makes sense. It's the sourest beer, the most puckering beer I've had from these guys so far was that OG IPA in the last video. That was very nice, but it was, you know, that was very, very sour, that one. But yeah, what you'll find with this beer is that when you take it in, that's when you get the sourness out of it, and it's quite a juicy sour actually. It's a very juicy and wet kind of sour thing that you get out of this. It's not really puckering and sharp in the way that like kettle sours and stuff like this are. So big thumbs up once again to Vault City. You can see exactly why these guys are so highly rated just now. But yeah, let's try and break down the flavour of this beer then. So the most important thing for me, of course, when I talk about sour beers, I always say the most important thing is the impact that you get from them, how the sourness comes in, and then how the beer just smooths out after that. This one's just got a lovely juicy slightly citricy note that comes in, and then just smoothens out, and the whole beer just goes together really nicely. So straight away with this beer, I would say that the oats are quite dominant in this one. In that middle third of your palate, you can feel that lovely, thick, smooth, oaty quality, and that just blankets the kind of middle of your palate there. You can feel a little bit of the kind of, what I would suspect is a bit of pale malt. You do get a little bit of a kind of nice smooth breadiness in there, and it almost feels as if the oats and that kind of barley malt quality are just kind of sitting together in there, and I really, really like how that all goes together. So yeah, that side of this beer I think is very, very nice. But as you move into the back third of your palate, and in fairness, you do get a little bit of wheaty bitiness on the very back of your palate there, but I think this thing that I've described as being in the middle third of your palate, it actually extends quite far back. It actually pushes over that normal border region between middle third and back third of your palate and goes quite far back. You have to go quite far back on the palate just to get a little bit of the wheaty bitiness of the beer. But yeah, I think the other thing that's kind of tying in with that is a little bit of the dustiness from the dry hopping. In my mind, I think that's kind of just that's sort of amplifying the effect of this kind of bready base that the beer has, but the oats really just make it feel really nice and thick actually. I really like the malt base that they have in this one, I really, really do. Yeah. Yeah. It's crazy, this beer, it really is very, very nice. But yeah, it's great. It's really, really lovely. Yeah, so in the very middle of your palate, you will get a little bit of a, from the alcohol, you will get a little bit of a kind of Werther's Original kind of butter candy type thing. You can feel that developing a little bit the further that you go into the aftertaste. But yeah, baseline of the beer is a kind of soft, white bready kind of thing, but you can feel the oats that are just kind of mixing in with that and infusing the whole thing. So rather than being kind of separate layers, it's like just one layer of this big, thick, oaty quality, but with like a sort of soft, kind of almost slightly crisp white bready edge to it. But like I say, as you go further back, you get a wee bit of graininess, like a sort of bread crusty quality, and then you feel the kind of smoother oats in there. But the malt base in this beer, I think, works very, very well for it. Other than that, there's not much to determine, or there's not much to talk about with the malt base actually, but it's nicely executed. In the back corners of the palate, you do get a nice little bit, a nice little touch of earthiness out of the beer, but as you move further forward, it does get quite a little bit of a nice kind of dry and slightly, it almost has a wee bit of spice to it, the floral aromaticity in this beer. I really like how that side of it goes together. But yeah, you can feel on that edge of your tongue, definitely there's the effects of some dry hopping in there. You can feel that sort of dustiness of these hop pellets that have been put into the beer when it's fermenting. You do get that out of this beer. So I dare say, if you left this beer a little bit longer that would mellow out even more, but it does seem to be in very good shape just now. It doesn't say when it was bottled actually, which I would say that's probably something I would advise Vault City to do with these IPAs, is put a bottled by date on them, because I think that could be very interesting, just to, you know, they could eventually do like a brewer's recommendation date on these things. They could test these things and see, right, when is this going to be in best shape, because I would guess, even though the recipe is evolving slightly with each version, of course, you could give a rough brewer's recommendation drinking date for this, because I think this one, if I maybe left this another week or something, I think you would have it just at the ideal point, because you still get a little bit of that dusty green kind of thing from the dry hopping in this. But it works very well, it does work very well with the beer, and just gives it a little bit more depth and fairness. So maybe that's me being picky, but it works very nicely. But yeah, good little bit of kind of floral aromaticity on the sides of your palate there, and round the very front curve of the tongue you've got a nice little bit of grassiness there, and in fairness that does have a little bit of zest to it as well. But yeah, as I was saying then, on that, as I always say, on that front third of your palate, that's where you get that nice oily bubble where those juicy fruity esters just roll their way out of the beer. So for me, the citric kind of sour part of this beer really comes out in there as well. So you get a lot of this kind of juicy, how would you say, you do get a lot of this kind of slightly, you do, when you take the beer in, you just get a little bit of a kind of citricy sour quality, but it juices out very, very quickly. It's almost like orange juice when you take orange juice in, it's very much like that. So when you take this in, that just rolls out across the front of your palate, but you can feel underneath that, you've got a little bit of the kind of bready, oaty kind of thing, just that forms the baseline in that front third of your palate. But on top of that, if you go towards the back of the front third of your palate there, you get the Victoria's Secret showing its head. You've got a slightly more pungent passion fruit, and as you move forward it just mellows out a little bit. Although it does, I'd say that it stays as passion fruit. You might think there's a bit of mango in there, but it does kind of stay like that as you go further forward. But as you reach the front half of that front third of your palate, it gets a little bit more oily and Nelson Sauvin like. You start to get these more oily qualities out from the Nelson Sauvin, which is really interesting, and that lingers into the aftertaste. But kind of almost in the middle of that that front third of your palate, that's where you get some of the kind of slightly citricy almost. It's not the same flavour as orange juice, but the sourness comes out in the same way, if that makes sense. That's where you're getting some of these kind of citricy notes out of this beer. And in the border region between the front third and middle third of your palate, you also get a little bit of a just sort of graininess or something in there. You can feel it. It's got a little bit of that kind of sour. It's almost like a kind of slightly sourdough bready kind of thing actually you get out of this, come to think of it. But yeah, it's a really very, very nicely done beer, this one, and I think this sour IPA series that they're doing definitely has a lot of potential. What I would say though, I would recommend that these guys try and do like a core sour IPA and have that brewing regularly, because I mean they've got like the Iron Brew Sour, which comes back quite often. They've got quite a few others that are fairly regular beers from these guys as well. So I would recommend that they do a sour IPA as a regular beer, and do it with like, do it with like Citra and Citra and Simcoe, or maybe Amarillo and Mosaic. Maybe do an orange one, maybe do a tropical one. That could be an interesting thing. Do it with the hops that are produced on a fairly big scale, so that it can be sustained as a regular brew, because this series does have potential. But keep doing these experimental ones as well, and showing how other hops can feature in it, because I think Nelson Sauvin and Victoria's Secret is an interesting combination, and absolutely. But the further you go into the aftertaste, like I say, it's that you do get a little bit of the dry hopping dustiness kind of lingering there, that sort of mix of oat and crisp white bready quality, that lingers there as well. It's just a really well executed, it is a really well executed beer, this. So thumbs up to Vault City for this one. Very impressed with this. So yeah, in terms of the mouthfeel then, this is a pretty full-bodied beer. The carbonation, it is quite smooth, but at the same time the beer feels quite wet, if that makes sense. I mean, you still get that Scottish water cleanliness out of it, which is kind of one of the trademarks of Scottish beer. You do still get that with this beer, but yeah, quite definitely full-bodied for me, this one, but just with that Scottish water cleanliness to it. In terms of bitterness, I think this beer's got to have about 40 IBUs to it. I think it does have a wee bit of bitterness, for sure, and you would expect that from an IPA, so I think maybe about 40 IBUs, and that would make sense for an 8% beer, because this is kind of like a double IPA, to be honest with you, in that sense. So it's a sour imperial, IPA, or an Imperial Sour IPA. I don't know how you would call it, but yeah, it's quite interesting. It's quite interesting from that perspective as well. So yeah, good little bit of IBU in this one. The malt base, like I say, is very, very smooth. You feel the nice thick oatiness to it, a little bit of that kind of crisp graininess almost from the sort of white bready elements, and the fruits are very interesting too. Lovely big kind of wet sour qualities, and some nice kind of just juicy hoppy things as well. But yeah, overall it's a really, really interesting beer, this one. I like very much how it kind of goes together, so it gets my seal of approval. But I would like to see a core sour IPA from these guys as well, but I look forward to trying more in this series. So maybe by the time I'm home in September there might be the version 4 out, so yeah, fingers crossed we can have a go at that. But I will be making another order from Vault City when I come home in September for my friend's wedding. But yeah, let's leave it at that for just now then. Once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Vault City Brewing. We will no doubt return to these guys in the near future. I've got another 2 beers that I want to review in this particular cycle of Scottish reviews, but this one is awesome and I would highly recommend that you check it out. So let me know your own thoughts on this beer. Like I said, check out my social media, check out Vault City Brewing, order some beers from the brewery and just enjoy them. They've got some great beers there, and this sour IPA series I think is a very good entry into the sour beers if you're not too keen on them. But yeah, their sours are very sweet, so you should enjoy them actually. But yeah, until the next time, it's Slàinte just now and I'll catch you guys later. Slàinte, skål, cheers. Sour IPA version 3 from Vault City Brewing, originally from Edinburgh, now brewing their beers in Dundee here in Scotland. Catch you guys in the next one.